Family. Sorry about the delay. Um, for some reason, my excuse me, Streamlabs didn't connect to Facebook, and I've been trying to figure out. Okay. I've been trying to figure out how to get it connected or not stress myself and just share my Twitch. Or YouTube be easier. To my Facebook, so Facebook family can still find us, but they'll be alright. I'm about to share. Oh shoot! Hey, there you go. Okay, we're gonna move on with life, family. Share. There we go. Overall, I hope y'all been having a fantastic week. Outside of this technology issue, it's been going ham. I mean, it's been a good week for me. It's been busy, extremely busy, but I'm glad I can be here with you all right now. Even with the technology, and that's just part of the game, right? It comes with the territory of trying to stream things live. Sometimes it just doesn't want to work the way it wants to, especially when you're doing multi streaming like we do here. It can be difficult. Difficult. So, family, if this is your first time here, I welcome you to Soul Swami Live, where we generally discuss healing in all its various forms, the evolution of becoming the best version of yourself. We do that through live energy readings, which we haven't done in a while, so I might need to get on that. Live energy readings, cut that down. Live energy readings. We do learn more information and perspectives. We do activities to help us assess and answer prompt questions, a bunch of different things to be able to help us be evolve into the best version of ourselves. You can catch this every Tuesday and Thursday. Well, book club is Thursday, but we also have a Tuesday show where that's where we do most of our conversating. Thursday tonight is wait a minute. Thursday nights is usually our book club night. Did I not do it? Thursday night is usually our book club night, which is a spinoff of. Okay, I didn't. So I know you hear me talking, but you don't see me. I'm at. All right, now you should be able to see me. So Thursday night of a spinoff of our Tuesday night show, which is in the effort to allow you to reconnect to that childlike energy in you by having someone read to you. And then we do our Tuesday night show, is where we do all of our information. That's an informative show. This week we are where this next series that we're discussing is about ego from a functional viewpoint and an identity viewpoint. So either the basic way that we generally know ego and the spiritual way that we learned about Nico. You can catch the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Instagram. Instagram's been giving us the business too lately. But so go ahead and do your follow. Make sure you follow so you can get those notifications when so you can get those notifications when they come up, right? The next thing, generally what we do at the beginning of every show is a little bit of energy work. And this week we are on our third eye, which resides right here in your forehead, or otherwise known as your intuition. And in our Tuesday show, we learned and understand that intuition now is just our subconscious recognizing the pattern before our conscious mind does. So intuition be able to guide you, third eyes for that. And that's the energy spot that we're focusing on this week. Your intuition, your third eye is for your intuition, your vision, your perception, and astral projection. Astral projection always sounds like some mystical thing, but it's something simple that we always do. Memories are the most familiar form of astral projection that we deal with. You have those memories where you can go right back to that space, time, and place. You can smell the smells, you see the people, you hear the sounds. All of it becomes real as you envision it in your mind again. So that's a perfect example of astral projection or dreaming. Dreaming in the sense of planning a goal, looking forward. You imagine all that in your mind, and then you can imagine it well enough where it seems like it's happening to you at this moment. So that's astral projection in normal terms, right? To remove some of the mysticism. That's one of the main things that we try to do on the show. Remove all this mysticism out of it. So these normal things that are normal in our body and in our lives don't seem so magical. So when they happen to us, or when we partake in them, we don't have that conflict, that spiritual conflict, because it's not against the laws of nature, right? So if you want to work on your third eye and you are into color therapy, the color for your third eye is indigo, right? So if you're into color therapy, you want to wear some more indigo clothes, you want to eat some indigo colored food, you want to spend some time in indigo colored light. All of those things are very good for activating your third eye. If you are into aromatherapy and essential oils, you want to think rosemary, cedarwood, clary sage, patchouli. All of those things are very good for activating your third eye. If you are into crystals and gemstones, you want to think labradorite. Amethyst. I don't have any amethyst sitting right beside me, but it's back on my shelf. Purple fluorite and sodalite are all good for your third eye, the energy of your intuition. The next thing we do is a little bit of sound therapy. Then we move on to breath work, affirmations, and then we'll continue with reading Changeling by Victor Lavalle. So during this time when we're doing sound, all you really have to do is just relax, listen to the sound, and make sure you're focusing on your energy and clearing your energy. Or since we're working on our third eye, you want to think of, reminding yourself to trust your intuition. You want to think about vision. You start visualizing your future, or reshape some of your perceptions around some of the things that you have experienced. That's what you just focus on. Focus on the energy of your third eye. Family, I literally forgot about our drums. We hadn't used the drums in so long. We're gonna have to bring those out again at some point. Probably Tuesday. I missed the drums, so we're gonna bring those out at a point. The next thing we will do is a little bit of breath work. This week we will do. Honestly, my spirit said 369. So with this 369, it is you breathe in, you hold it for 3 seconds, and exhale. Then you breathe in, hold it for 6 seconds, exhale, and then breathe in, hold it for 9 seconds, and exhale. But during this time, all you really have to do is just listen to the sound of my voice as I guide you through the breathing. Focus in on your breathing, focus in on your energy. Pay attention to the places that your mind wander, because your mind may want you to revisit your relationship with some of these thoughts, ideas, and places. On the count of three, family, we will start with 369. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in deep. Hold for 3, 2, 3. Release. Breathe in deep. Hold for 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release. Breathe in deep. Hold for 9, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and release. One more time, family. Breathe in. Breathe in deep. Hold for 3, 2, 3. Release. Breathe in deep. Hold for 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and release. Breathe in deep. Hold for 9, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Release. Next, I want you to repeat these affirmations after me. These are very good to remind yourself of the power you have, your worthiness, and to balance your emotions during high emotional times. Definitely excellent at charging the power of your third eye, your intuition, and help you to get to a space where you can trust yourself again. All you have to do is just repeat these affirmations after me, remember them, and use them when necessary. I trust my intuition. My imagination is powerful. I think clearly. My third eye sees all. I trust my intuition. My imagination is powerful. I think clearly. And my third eye sees all. Now we can get started with the shoe. This is your reminder. You can purchase 7 Spaces of Healing. It is a great tool that helps you to be able to conceptualize 7 very important spaces in your healing process. That is a space of love, a space of healing, a space of solitude, a space of trust, a space of risk without judgment, a space of accountability, and a space of forgiveness. All things that you need to cultivate within yourself and make sure that you are a part of to support your evolution. You can get your book today, tomorrow, right now, if you want to, on Amazon. It is available on Amazon. So where are we at in the story? I don't even remember. I'm not even going to tell you no lies. I know William Wheeler and his mystical monsters or whatever messed up the island of the women, for the island that was for the women and children. They all escaped. Apollo is on his way to escape from the island, and he was trying to roll back to Brooklyn. He actually did. Not Brooklyn. Bronx, somewhere. I forgot. But I think he actually recently just made it there and escaped. He brought, oh no, Scratch. I know exactly where they're at. He just went to dig up his son. So that's where he was leaving the island. And Kyle, the leader of the island, told him to go see his son. So he got his friend and they went to dig up his son's body. Right? And what happened? Yeah, he touched the baby's forehead. That's the last thing. And with that, it broke the spell. So if you're reading along, make sure you support the authors and copy the book. Catch the book for yourself. If you're reading along, read along. We are on chapter 77. Thorns. His finger caught on a knot of them. That's how it felt. Sharp enough to tear skin. So surprising, he pulled back, and only after the seconds of shock had passed did he realize his ring finger was bleeding. The tip had been cut when he caressed his dead child's head. Apollo steadied himself, and when he clutched at the body again, he made sure to touch only the blue blanket it had been buried in. Inside the grave, the world remained lightless, but above him, Apollo found the glow of the rising sun. He lifted the body from the casket, lighter than he remembered, and smaller too, though the fabric of the blanket he felt a knotty mass, as if he'd held a wasp nest instead of a baby. He'd become so used to the smell of dirt, and after hours of digging this hole, that he could smell nothing else. Above him, at the surface, Patrice coughed and said, "That's foul." He looked over his shoulder. Patrice looked more frightened than him. He wondered at the sight he must have just seen then. His skin dirty all over, his face and neck, his back and stomach, his hands, everything was coated in earth, entirely soiled. And he was carrying what? He rose up from his knees and brought the baby higher. And in the dawn light, he saw what he held. It looked like clotted hair. The stuff you'd fish out the bathtub drain in a house that had been abandoned, overtaken by the elements, matted and gnarled. What made this monstrous was the size, and as big as a 6-month-old. Pounds and pounds of hair, fur, looped and twined so tightly, it looked more like barbed wire. How had he mistaken this for his child? For his child. He held it, but felt a rising impulse to throw it back into the dirt, to clean his hands with holy water. He wrenched, stooped forward, nearly dropping the thing. He looked down at this bundle and wrenched again. Despite the blanket, his skin itched with repulsion. What the fuck? Patrice staggered back from the grave. It was too much to see. Inadvertently, he stood on another grave, that of a woman named Catherine Lincoln. The Scottish call it glamour. Glamour. an illusion to make something appear different than what it really is. I know that's right. That makes sense. Because that's exactly what glamour is. This was what he'd been feeding and changing and hugging and holding. This is what he sang to at night when Emma wouldn't do it anymore. This is what he took to the park with all the other dads so early in the morning. He thought of Ida, holding her false sister, a child made of entirely ice, loving it as if it was alive. He found he couldn't drop the thing, but at the same time, he wanted, he needed for it to be far from him. He extended his arms. Now the blanket fell away from the body, so it draped backward over his hands, fully exposed top to bottom. It really did look like a wasp nest, gray, and the hair was so tightly ground together, it looked woven. There was more mingled within the layers of the hair. He thought he'd cut his finger on a thorn, but that was wrong. Now he could see it. Jutting out here and there were fragments of teeth and splinters of bone and shards of fingernail. Emma, he whispered, I should have believed. Then he felt something new through the blanket, a tremor, movement. In the light, Apollo saw deep inside the little form something moving. He watched the face, or the place where the face should have been. There were two concave grooves like eye sockets, smooth into clay. Below that, a thin line ran a mouth. A mouth? And below that, where a chest would be, deeper inside, Apollo saw a small mass, a lump. A heart? Faintly, it beat. He watched in quiet terror. He wished to unsee this. He shivered and felt his legs going weak, and then, to make it worse, the heart did more than beat. It moved. The lump shuttled faintly higher, and then again. It was climbing, wriggling like a maggot. It reached the thin line of the mouth, and then the mouth parted. There was no other way to say it. The thing bucked, one grand exhalation, as if it unearthed it, finally allowed it to breathe. But it hadn't been a heart he'd seen inside the little boy. Instead, that inhuman mouth spewed a mass of water bugs, at least a dozen, each one as big as a silver dollar. They wriggled around the blanket and reached Apollo's arms. They crawled up his arms, scrambling towards his neck and face. Apollo howled. The sound of an animal, not a man. He dropped the body. The blue blanket floated to the far end of the grave, draped back over the casket. He slapped at it, the roaches on his arms. One made it to his neck. He felt its bristled legs skittered as it reached his cheek. He nearly tore his own skin away just to get it off. Meanwhile, the baby, landed at an angle. It seemed to be sitting up, watching him. He still felt the bug on the skin. Overwhelming disgust filled him with the instincts to destroy. Apollo found the mattock and brought it down on the casket. It sounded like it was chopping wood. In minutes, he destroyed the casket and turned the rest of the sectional liner into dust. At 5:15 in the morning, an early sun rose in an especially clear morning sky. Birds chirped. The night had fallen away, and down in the grave, Apollo raised the mattock one last time, aiming for the creature. But something about his posture was so unsettling to him, or to be more precise, so familiar. At this angle, it might have been a child strapped in a booster seat and pulled up to the kitchen table. In fact, it had been that child. And Apollo had fed it, spoonful after spoonful of applesauce or yogurt or sweet potatoes he roasted and pureed. He set the mattock down. Despite the revulsion he felt, he picked up the thing one more time. Without the blanket, the rough surface of the body threatened to cut him again. so he was forced to hold it tenderly. He focused on his face, the sunken suggestion of its eyes, the thin line of his mouth that hadn't quite closed again. This gave it the suggestion of a sleeping child, and Apollo couldn't stop himself from wanting to soothe it. Not a conscious reaction, but something primal. He cradled the figure with one forearm and gently held the back of the head with his right hand. With his left, he touched the spot where eyebrows would have been. He traced his fingers down. Once he had seen his son's face here, he tapped the place where the nose would have been, where it had been. A nose he'd loved. How many times had he kissed it? 1,000 times a week. He brought his fingers to the mouth. He used to tap Brian's lips, trying to predict when teeth would appear. He rested his fingers there. The body moved again. The mouth. The maw. It opened and closed, stiffly like a puppet's jaw. Then he heard a straining sound, like an empty styrofoam cup being squeezed and released, the hinges of the dry jaw cracking. Apollo feared more roaches would stream out, but that didn't happen, so he held on to the body. The mouth stretched and shut. Not hard to see what it was doing. It was trying to feed. Drop of his blood quivered on those inhuman lips, the blood from his cut finger. Nothing else about the body suggested life. Only the mouth became animated. Not really alive, but impossible to think of it as truly dead. An automation fueled by blood and belief. As it sucked the blood from his finger, the creaking sound came to a rhythm. Squeeze and release. Squeeze and release. Apollo pulled his finger from the jaw, and in an instant the jaw stopped working. It lay as still as before. Something made you and then left you behind, he whispered. Patrice's voice came to him from outside the grave. This is way past late, Apollo. We have to go. Apollo crouched and found the blue blanket. He wrapped the body in it again. He'd done a lot of damage to the casket, but best he could, he returned the body to its original resting place. Once it was in the shattered remains of the casket, once it had been returned to the shadows of the grave, its glamour returned. It appeared to be a child again. His child again. In the dark, it became Brian Kagwa. He checked to see if the red string had been cut loose by the thorns, but it's not held. You deserve better than you got, Apollo said. I'm sorry if you felt any pain. Apollo closed the lid of the coffin as best he could. He tossed the mattock out, then the flat head of the shovel. Patrice extended a hand and Apollo took it. Apollo climbed out the grave. He went into a pocket and gave the zip card to Patrice. He told Patrice to go and get the minivan. He'd be out soon. Apollo used the shovel to throw dirt down onto the casket. He couldn't fill the grave. He didn't have the time, and his body didn't have the power. But he wouldn't leave the grave with a body exposed. After that, Apollo took up the mattock and moved the brass grave marker. He brought the adze down into the dirt, and it sank deep with that first blow. He used the handle like a lever and pulled back until the grave marker buckled. He moved 6 inches and did the same again. When he reached back, this time, the top half of the grave marker lifted from the dirt. The marker had been attached to a granite block, common practice. In order to remove the marker, Apollo would have to take the block as well. Since this had been his baby's grave, the block was small. In 3 minutes, Apollo pulled it free. The sound of roots tearing loose and soil cracking played alongside his labored grunting. He dropped the mattock so close to collapse it seemed impossible to do anything more than breathe. And yet, with a stoop, he lifted the grave marker with its granite backing. It must have weighed 30 pounds. His body didn't know how he could handle the weight, but there was no room for his discussion. This wasn't the grave of Brian Cagwa, so why would his father leave the marker there? Apollo moved towards the fence. He hefted the grave marker under one arm and dragged the mattock behind him with the other. The Odyssey idled in the street, Patrice at the wheel. When Apollo appeared at the fence, Patrice startled as if he was seeing death by daylight. Apollo opened the side door of the car and plopped the grave marker down as if it was a bag of fertilizer. He dropped the mattock onto the floor. He got in. Patrice looked back at the marker and the mattock. "We can't explain this stuff if we get pulled over," Patrice said. "You understand that, right?" "Then don't get pulled over," Apollo said. Patrice put the car in motion. Port Washington became Muncie Park, then Manhasset, then Great Neck, and onward in the journey out of Long Island and back to New York City. Apollo felt a kind of calm that might be called certainty. The magic of the world had been revealed. All the deceptions were gone. To believe in only the practical, the rational, the realistic was kind of a glamour as well. It is. Gives you that false sense of security. But he couldn't enjoy the illusion anymore. Monsters aren't real until you meet one. Well, Apollo had met a monster. He and Emma and Brian, they all met it. Apollo wasn't thinking about the thing in the grave or even the thing it spawned. He meant the man who pretended to be his friend, the former William Wheeler. He'd met his enemy. He knew his true name. Unit 7, Kindergarten. Chapter 78. Brian West was at the front door. Apollo reached his hand in the air and turned all 3 locks. It wasn't Brian West yet. The man knelt and pulled off his blue skin. Brian West called Lillian Cagwa's name. Gargamel and Azrael wanted to destroy the Smurfs. Hot water ran in the bathroom and the apartment filled with steam. Gargamel and Azrael hid in the woods, the Smurfs suspecting nothing. Brian West picked up his son. Brian West carried Apollo to the bathroom. "You're coming with me," he said. He took off Apollo's clothes. Chapter 79. Apollo slept on and off for 2 days and 2 nights. It might be a stretch to call it sleeping, more like a little coma. He woke in the starts, but couldn't muster the mindfulness to do more than roll over and fall back asleep again. He felt so groggy. It seemed like he had been dosed. The last 2 days had been an uncut drug, an overdose of the improbable. Patrice had driven him home, helped him upstairs, where he stumbled and flopped onto the mattress. Apollo remembered none of this. He had sat in the back of the minivan, cradling the grave marker, bearing his son's name, and awakened in his bed. Outside, he saw morning light. He thought he'd only shut his eyes for 10 minutes. Then he tried to rise. His body still felt sore, so bruised he might have turned purple. He staggered into the kitchen. He stood at the sink and stared into glass-faced kitchen cabinets, but could only make out a hazy vision of himself. He and Emma had bought the cabinets home from IKEA by train, 2 boxes per trip, because that's all they could carry. A Coram wall cabinets in Liddy white, each cost $115 before taxes. Ridiculous, the kind of stuff that comes to mind. Insane to imagine they once fought over the choice as if nothing mattered more. I know that's right, okay? He needed water. He needed food. He filled the glass from the tap, then drank 3 more. He turned to find the grave marker on the kitchen table, laid out like a placemat. The mattock was propped up by the door. What about the book? He tensed so tightly he nearly threw his back out. He scanned the kitchen, the living room, went to the front door and opened it. He returned to the bedroom, his bed, no book, no book. Had he tucked it under one arm, hadn't he? He slipped it into the back of his pants pocket while he held Gail. The book, he focused on that. He'd lost the one Cal gave him, but he had another one. Here, his father's copy. He went to Brian's room and pulled it from the shelf. Outside over there. He turned to the kitchen and slid the grave marker aside so he'd have room to read. Then before he sat, he pawed through the pantry and found a box of table crackers. They were stale, but that didn't matter. He would force himself to eat something. When Papa was away at sea, Apollo read. On the next page, Apollo stopped to examine the image of Mama, a young white woman with long blonde brown hair. She wore a faded red dress with a white ruffled collar. She stared into the middle distance. At what? At nothing. Her look was one of a woman lost, bereft, depressed. In the story, the father might have been off on a ship, but the mother hardly counted it as present either. Apollo brought a finger to the illustration now, her vacant eyes, her downturned mouth. He traced her slumped shoulders. Hadn't he looked across this kitchen table at Emma and seen that same woman? On the next page, the scene of Ida playing music for her sister, the goblins sneaking in through the window. Then the goblins made off with a human child, leaving its replacement behind. Next, Ida picked up the child and held it and hugged it. The page after that showed the ice child half melted and dropped to the floor. Finally, Ida had realized the fraud. His finger rested on 2 words, the Changeling. There it was in the crib, and Ida's arm disintegrated on the floor. The Changeling. Apollo couldn't keep reading because the words on the page blurred. This happened because his hands were shaking. He had to lay the book flat. He heard the sound of dirt being cleared with a shovel and a mattock, the hours of the night he had been down in that hole. No one was watching the baby, he said in the empty apartment. But then he turned and looked at the chair to his right, the one where Emma used to sit. He could almost make out her image, a ghostly silhouette. He touched the ragged red string with his thumb, turned it on his ring finger. One person was watching, Apollo said. She said Brian is in the forest. There's only one forest in all of New York City. Chapter 80. He packed a suitcase because he didn't know when he'd be back. He couldn't be sure he'd ever be back. He found the small suitcase that they kept under the bed, the one they planned to use if Emma went into labor and the home birth didn't work. Their hospital bag, Emma had unpacked most of it long ago, of course. The nightgown and extra toiletries, slippers and socks, snacks and drinks, all those things had been returned to their drawers or consumed. The only stuff left in it was a pack of bendy straws for sipping liquids during labor and a bottle of massage oil. To save space, Emma had slipped both into a pouch on the side. Apollo didn't realize they were there when he pulled it out. So now both the straws and the oil will be making the trip with him. The only forest in New York City is located in Queens, in the neighborhood of Forest Hills. He went to the closet in Brian's room, dug through bags and boxes that he and Emma had filled, and found a change of clothes for his wife. He hardly paid attention to the items, just pants, blouse, sweater, panties, socks. He found a pair of pajamas for Brian, a onesie with footies, a red and green holiday theme kind of thing. Baby becomes an elf. But when Apollo held it up, he realized that if Brian was alive, he wouldn't fit these clothes anymore. He'd been 10 months old now. This idea struck him with a cold sadness, so chilling, he had to grab some size 1 pajamas quickly and jam them into the bottom of the bag and just get out of that room. In the living room, he packed the mattock. Excuse me. Then set Emma and Brian's clothes down on top of it. He closed the lid and lifted it. With the mattock inside, the suitcase felt heavy with violence. Instinctively, he checked his coat for his wallet, but it had been lost. No ATM card, no credit cards, no driver's license. He had ceased to exist in any modern sense, or more precisely, he had lost access to nearly his entire modern existence. The only totem left was his phone. In the kitchen, there were cracker crumbs on the bronze grave marker. Beside the grave marker lay his father's book. Apollo opened the suitcase one more time. He packed the book and the grave marker. For a moment, he pawed through the contents: a mattock, some clothes, a children's book, and a gravestone. This was how you packed for a trip to another world, not another borough. And off he went. Chapter 81. It snowed in Queens. Apollo left the train station, Forest Hills, 71st Avenue, and as he climbed the stairs to the sidewalk, he felt the flakes against his face. The stairwell was so crowded, rush hour in full effect, that he nearly lost his grip on the suitcase twice just from all the jostling. He stopped at the top of the stairs, his arms tired from hauling the bag, but he wasn't given any time to get his wind back because there were 500 more men and women right behind him, and they didn't all have things to do. Trying to stand in the place would have been like turning his back on a cyclone. He was tossed and nearly turned over. He scurried against the nearest storefront, a Chase Bank. The evening sky turned as dark as a shell, and the snow came down. The thick flakes clung to umbrellas and hats, the roof of cars and buses. The snow continued to fall, and traffic backed up on 71st Avenue. A white family had hailed a livery cab, and now the mother was loading a gaggle of children into the back seat. The father folded the stroller with expertise and walked to the back of the cab, knocking on the trunk. Both mother and father looked haggard and angry, and Apollo felt his throat tighten with envy. Those crackers hadn't filled him up that much. Neither had 4 cups of water. Down the block he saw a Starbucks sign. He lost his wallet, all his money, but he still might get something in his belly. He had the Starbucks app on his phone, enough on his account for a meal he could take with him into the forest. If they had sandwiches, he could even leave a trail of breadcrumbs so he and Emma and Brian might find their way out. It was a cramped little Starbucks brand, long and narrow. The store had look of a sunken living room. Enter, then climb down 3 stairs. There were 2 small tables with 2 chairs at each. The tables had been pushed together, and somehow 9 teenagers fit themselves into those 4 seats. 7 o'clock. Most people returning home from work, but still a long line. "Welcome to Starbucks. May I take your order?" He couldn't see the barista yet. The line ran that long. He scanned the small fridge unit where they kept the sandwiches and salads and juices and milks and waters. He'd figured he'd clear them out, or at least as much as he could carry. He could also just grab it and run. He was in a fucking hurry after all. The thought of committing the crime, even one so minor, caused a memory flare. He was on parole. He opened his phone and checked for the recent calls. There were a few. He recognized Lillian's number. There had been 6 from a 212 caller that could have been his PO. None had left messages. What if he swiped those sandwiches and got caught? Hard to flee when you're hauling a suitcase. And what was inside it? Holy shit. If he found to be shoplifting, parole violator with a digging tool and a grave marker, why in holy hell had he brought those things? His rational mind scolded his magical mind. He resigned himself to waiting on line patiently. He'd even say sir or ma'am to the barista just to be safe. Then this wild-looking old white man, standing 5 places ahead of him in line, leaned into the fridge unit and scooped up all the remaining food, just like that. Those awful prepackaged sandwiches cradled in one arm and a slightly less awful prepackaged salad in the other. He cleared the damn thing out. The old man reached the register and dropped the gathered food across the counter. I better get you a bag or two, the barista said. Oh, the old man said. Do you think so, Louise? I thought I'd carry all this stuff on my head. The barista ignored the words, registering only a weary fluttering in her eyes. When she brought the 2 paper bags from under the counter, the old man leaned forward and snatched them from her. The woman didn't even respond, only scanned each item and handed it over. The old man leaned backward and squinted at the other customers. He looked like an old Viking gone to pasture, but a hint of the berserker still remained. Despite his age, the tall old man, fairly throbbing with vitality, slim, and the skin on his face was tight against his cheeks. He had a thinning beard, and his hair, visible in wisps underneath his wool cap, looked like white lines of electricity. How much? He demanded. How much? It's right there. A man behind him on the line snapped, pointing to the register display. The old man looked at the other customer and slapped the counter. Do you know there was a time when a man might be told the price to pay instead of having to read it off a screen? Weren't dinosaurs alive then too? The man asked. The old Viking frantically patted his waist as if he were reaching for a gun or a battle axe, and seemed mystified when he found no weapon there. The man who'd made the dinosaur snap waved the old man off wearily. The old man took his bags of Starbucks food, beaten but unbowed. He muttered to himself as he walked, head down. He slammed past the table of crowded teenagers. To Apollo's surprise, they said nothing. Their phones held their attention. When Papa was away at sea, the old man grumbled as he plowed through the store and continued to mutter as he moved. Apollo had been scanning the counter. What would he do for food now? They had small packs of nuts or cookies by the register. He could fill up on those, he supposed. He felt a vague buzzing along his jawline, as if a fly were coming too close to his face. He scratched at his chin, but it didn't fix it. Apollo spun around. The old man. The old Viking paused at the door as if collecting himself before stepping out into the storm. The whole time he spoke the lines from the children's book in a tortured growl, and Apollo listened along like a child. The old man walked out the door into the night. Apollo would have sprinted towards the door and tackled the man if hadn't been wheeling that heavy suitcase. When he got to the door, he saw the shape of the old man already 2 blocks away. Apollo followed. Chapter 82. It's difficult to follow a man when you're pulling a squeaky suitcase. Apollo tried to carry it instead, but between the mattock and the gravestone, he couldn't heft it for long. The old man moved southwest down 71st Avenue, and Apollo kept his distance, trailing by a block in the hopes he would not be heard as they entered the Tony section of the neighborhood, Forest Hills Garden. 71st Avenue became Continental Avenue, and the sidewalks blossomed with trees and Tudor brick homes lined the road, which hardly had any traffic. And just like that, a walk of 3 blocks, and Apollo entered one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in New York City. 2 blocks ahead, barely visible in the dim light of a cast iron street lamps, was the old Viking striding on. He and Apollo were the only human beings to be seen, and the Grand Tutors watched both of them, solemn and caution. They passed Sulcombe Crescent and Olive Place, Groton Street, and Harrow Street. The sun set, and Apollo followed the man through the deepening night. Ingram Street, Juno Street, Loubet Street, Manisse. The old man never looked back, never turned his head as he crossed the street, and never seemed tired, though he had to be 30 years older than Apollo. Finally, they crossed the Metropolitan Avenue. Goodbye to the brick, and hello detached colonial one family. Ah, man. Okay. The end of brick facades and the rise of aluminum siding. This lasted all the way to Union Turnpike, and still the old man traveled on as if he was leading a tour through the descending class structure of Queens. It really felt to Apollo as if they tripped into another region, another world. Block after block of single-family homes, sidewalks lined with aging cars and rusty SUVs, gas station and corner stores, and then they reached the northern forest. The northeastern edge of Forest Park, more than 500 acres of wilderness right there in the borough of Queens. If they come to a towering city of silver and gold, it would have seemed no less strange. The old man crossed the street to walk along the perimeter of the park. Apollo thought that maybe the old guy had finally figured out he was being followed and planned to sprint into the woods, lose Apollo inside. But maybe that wouldn't matter. He led Apollo to where he wanted to be. The old Viking reached the corner and went around it. Apollo broke into a jog, pulling a suitcase behind him. Creaky wheels, be damned. Apollo turned to the corner, expecting the old man to appear right there and confront him, but the old man was far ahead. He stood before a stairway that led up into the grounds of the park. There were 2 street lamps at the base of the stairs, so Apollo saw quite clearly as the old man climbed to the top of the stairs. But instead of disappearing into the trees and underbrush, the old man went down on his knees, his head bowed. He set the bags of Starbucks food at the foot of the stairs. He stood and watched the tree line. Because of the street lamps, Apollo could see the man's profile. His lips were moving, but was he speaking to someone or simply muttering to himself? Hard to say. Finally, the old man turned and walked back down the stairs. The way he held the railing made him appear tired or drunk. Apollo thought the old man might return the way he'd come, so he picked up the suitcase and crossed the street and hid himself in the shadows. He propped the suitcase against a brick wall of brick garage and settled himself on the luggage, a makeshift chair. The old man watched the top of the stairs, the border of the trees, the brown bags emblazoned with the Starbucks logo. Eventually, he turned and strolled away. Apollo meant to keep following, but he couldn't do it. A police car appeared at the corner. It came down Park Lane South as casual as a puma. Just as the car reached Apollo, the driver threw on those red and blue lights, though he didn't use the siren. Apollo had been concentrating so directly on the bags of food at the top of the stairs that when he saw the lights pop on, he fell right off the suitcase and sprawled on the sidewalk. The officer in the passenger seat rolled down his window and leaned out to watch Apollo. He surveyed Apollo for about 20 seconds before he spoke. "Bad place for you to nap, my man." Apollo pushed himself up onto his knees. The cop in the driver's seat watched him carefully. "That was fast," Apollo said. The cop pointed at the houses behind Apollo. "This part of Forest Hill still called Little Norway. You were never going to blend in, even at night, especially at night, the driver said. Patrice had been right. Heroes like him didn't get to make mistakes. Apollo set his hands on the ground to get himself up to his feet, but the cop at the passenger window said, "Why don't you stay there on the ground for a minute?" "It's cold," Apollo said. "It's winter," the cop said. The driver opened his door and came around. Then the cop on the passenger side stepped out. He walked closer to Apollo, put out one hand and waved for Apollo to stand. "Where do you live?" the cop said. The driver looked behind them into the park, then back at Apollo. He didn't seem to notice the bag of food at the top of the stairs. To him, it must have been seemed like any other piece of garbage. His radio beeped and chattered, but he ignored it. The red and blue lights continued to glow and gave the moment a dizzying quality. "Manhattan," Apollo said. He'd left his hands at his sides, but still far enough from his pockets that neither cop might have get a reason to get shook. This would go worse for Apollo if they got scared. More importantly, he realized if they called his name in, they'd find out he'd violated his parole. He hadn't been to the therapy session, and even worse, hadn't gone to see his PO. Any urge he might have to argue hid itself away deep inside. The only point was to avoid being hauled back to jail and getting shot to death. The two were his top priority now. "You came all the way to Forest Hill from Manhattan with a suitcase just to lie on the sidewalks in Little Norway?" "That's one long trip," the driver said, and he let out a quiet, incredulous laugh. Then behind them both at the top of the stairs, something stepped out of the woods. Someone. Emma Valentine. His wife stood at the top of the stairs, but it wasn't her. Not exactly. A witch. That's what he saw. He wouldn't ever have thought the gaunt figure was the woman he'd married. It was the coat he recognized. The knee-leaf maroon down puffer. "Are you from New York, even? Do you have a puffer coat, even?" Sorry. It was the maroon puffer coat that she'd been wearing in the video from the night she escaped. The coat was torn and dirty, and the same could be said about Emma. She looked as thin and tough as the limb of a tree, but also, really and truly, she glowed. That's funny because when she paddled off on the TV show, she definitely was glowing. As she stepped out of the woods, she seemed to walk on a cloud, an actual nimbus of blue energy. She cast off a color almost as bright as the blue police lights flashing on the patrol car. It was as if she wore sparks of electricity. Emma Valentine stepped out of the woods and picked up the bags of Starbucks food. Then she turned and walked back into the deeper darkness and disappeared. And that was that. "Seriously, Chief," the cop closer to Apollo said, "if you need a shelter space, we can point you the right way, but you can't be lurking around people's houses. Give people the creeps," the other cop said. "No, sir," Apollo muttered. "I mean, yes, sir." She was glowing. She was. It took a clap on the shoulder from one of the cops to bring Apollo back to himself. That was Emma. Was she living in the park? And why had the old man brought food to her? Now he looked at the officers with clarity. "I don't need a shelter or anything," he said. "I just got confused. I'll go back home. I'll catch the bus." "You got money?" the cop asked, arm still on his shoulder. It would be easy for the man to tighten his grip and force Apollo into the back of the police car. "I can't." But before he finished floating some lie, the cop walked back to the police car. "We got any more of those Metro cards?" he asked his partner. "Look in the back," the driver said, and while his partner leaned into the car, he came around the front close to Apollo, hand floating near his hips, his holstered pistol. "Got it." He returned to Apollo. "This has $20 on it. This is a gift card from the NYPD. The Metro card lay inside a clear plastic sleeve. The cop tore it open and handed the card to Apollo. You can catch the Q11 or the Q21 right over on Woodhaven Boulevard, the cop said. Thank you, Apollo said. He accepted the Metro card, but then he just stood there. If the cops drove off, he could still rush up the stairs right now and hope, maybe, to find her. I'll tell you what, the driver said. We'll give you a ride to the bus stop right now. Now they being extra helpful, man. That never really happens like that. Now they being extra helpful, and he on a serious side quest. That's bananas. The other went back to the patrol car and opened the back door. You don't have to thank us, he said, but you do have to accept. He climbed in, and the lights were turned off. As the car approached the bus stop on Woodhaven Boulevard, the officer in the passenger side spoke without turning his head. We love driving down Park Lane South. It's one of our favorite streets. We'll be driving down most of the night. We don't expect to be seeing you there again. They reached the bus stop, and one cop let Apollo out. Apollo wheeled the suitcase onto the sidewalk. The driver rolled down his window. It's going to be a while for that bus, he said, but you need to be on it. Don't let us see you out here again. It might be a bad night for you if we do. Apollo didn't respond, but because no response was required. The cops drove off, and they stayed at the stop until their car went well out of view. He wasn't returning to Washington Heights, but no doubt those cops had been telling the truth. They would be patrolling the perimeter of the grounds all night. He needed to shelter until morning. All right, we read one more chapter and we wrap it up, family. Chapter 83. The Forest Park Visitor Center sat only 30 yards behind them. Just inside the park and beside it, a smaller brick structure, the public bathrooms. Apollo waited at the bus stop for 15 minutes. No bus, no cops, no one around but him. Finally, he hurried through the front gates into the park. He shut his eyes as he crossed from the sidewalk to the concrete path leading to the bathrooms, expecting the cops to jump him, but they didn't. He reached the bathroom. There were two doors, one on either side of the small brick hut. The men's room and the woman's, heavy black doors, showed chipping paint and faint names or symbols. Many pictures of tits and dicks etched into the surface. Both doors were locked, large padlocks hanging from the looped handles, but Apollo had brought along the right tool. He laid the suitcase flat, unzipped it, and took out the mattock. If he slid that flat mattock blade between the door and the frame, he could force the door open quickly. Now, the only question was which bathroom he wanted to hide inside, the women's or the men. If he had to guess which side would be cleaner, there was no question. It depends on what you call clean, because a friend of mine and myself, we used to do some contracting side mission, and of course we were cleaning restaurants, and we had to clean the women's bathroom. The men's bathroom, sometimes it smell like pee because they ain't flushed the toilet. But some of the most disgusting things, I never seen blood on the wall in the men's bathroom. So we don't want to, there should be a question on which one is the cleanest, for real, for real. He popped the lock of the ladies' room door with two sharp yanks. The metal door shrieked loudly each time. So loud, Apollo felt sure the cops would arrive, or a denizen of Little Norway would call him in. Some concerned citizen. Anonymous phone call had killed many black men before him. But the bathrooms were far enough inside the park and flanked by trees. Apollo pushed the bathroom door open. There were no windows, so the room remained murky. He stepped inside and let his eyes adjust. 2 stalls, 1 sink, enough floor space for him to set his suitcase flat so So cold here that the bathroom didn't even stink, or maybe his nose had just gone numb. He stepped outside once more. Why not just go looking for Emma now? He took 4 steps in the direction of the forest, but stopped at the sight of all that territory, the shrouded dark. Would Emma welcome him in? Would she even give him a chance to admit the mistakes he's made? The woman who stepped out of those woods hardly seemed human, and he was the man who didn't believe her. What might she do to him if he stumbled across her in those woods well after midnight? Finding her in daylight seemed safer. No shame in admitting it, he felt afraid. Also, the park spanned hundreds of acres. Wandering that much land late at night in the midst of the winter was a surefire way to end up frozen dead in the maze of trees. No thanks, Jack. He returned to the bathroom. The darkness inside the ladies' room would become total as soon as Apollo shut the door. He welcomed this idea like bedding down inside a cocoon. Apollo still couldn't quite believe what he'd seen all these months, and there stood Emma. The last time they'd seen each other, they were the exhausted parents of an infant, estranged man and wife. What were they now? Apollo needed to talk all this through with someone, wanted to explain what the old man had done, sitting the food at the top of the stairs like an offering, and when Emma appeared, she scooped up the big bag quickly as if she'd been expecting to find it. He took out a cell phone and dialed a number. You shouldn't be using your own phone, Patrice said as soon as he picked up. His mouth pulled away from the phone. It's Apollo. You don't have a choice, Apollo said. I don't have a choice, Apollo said. I can't outthink this dude every minute. Patrice huffed into the mouthpiece. Yeah, you plan for one thing, and he'll just switch to another. You want to hear something wild? I came back home and did a complete flush of the computer. Found his fingerprints all over my files. Do you know this dude took back the money he paid us? We couldn't even do the right thing with the cash. Cleared it right out of our account. This motherfucker is as good as the Russians. So he knows everything, Apollo said. No one knows everything, Patrice said. But he knows more than we'd like. Apollo straightened up, his back tight against the cold wall of the woman's bathroom inside Forest Hills Park. Where are you now? Patrice asked. Instinctively, Apollo formed the words Forest Park, but caught himself. He'd made this call so he could say he'd seen Emma, but that seemed too imprudent now. What was the only way to keep the secret in the modern world? Never type it on the keyboard, never utter it over a phone. When Apollo didn't answer, Patrice let it go. Are you and Dana okay? Now Patrice spoke quietly, sounding winded or wounded. Dana has to sign in at her job at the start of her shift, he said. Normal procedure. But she got there yesterday, and they told her they had no record of her being employed by them at all. Obviously, they know she works here. But right now, officially, according to their records, Dana Green has never worked for them. I mean, this motherfucker wiped her out completely. And for what? Because she's married to me? Because I'm helping you? They're treating it like a computer error, but how much damage is this guy going to do? One angry man with a computer, that's all it takes anymore. He sounded pained. 124th, 86th Road, Patrice said. What's that? Apollo asked. That's about the only piece of help I can give you. 124, 86th Road. That's in Forest Hills. Can you get out there tonight? Apollo leaned forward into a crouch, as if Patrice or someone else might suddenly see him there. He decided to pretend. Why go there, he asked. What's in Forest Hills? You remember when that motherfucker took us on this boat? He said he only had one boat signed up for that stupid app of his. I took a look behind the wall and found out the boat was registered to a Jorgen Knudsen. The address is 124 86th Road. Wheeler probably stole access to his boat just like he stole his wife's money. But at least if you talk to Knudsen, he might have some kind of clue and find William. I saw Apollo began but hesitated. 124. That's the house number. Patrice's voice played weak and tiny in the air, but it brought him back. 86th Road, Forest Hills, Jorgen Knudsen. Go find that guy. Don't think about anything else. I'm hanging up now, just in case. We love you. Good luck. All right, family, we'll stop there. And we'll pick up next week. So, family, I hope you have a great weekend. I appreciate your time and your energy and support as always. I hope to have you back here Tuesday as we continue our discussion on ego. I think we're going to be talking about ego defenses, the techniques that ego uses to defend itself, and then we'll probably get into some questions to be able to assess how we understand the ego or how we navigate between different types of egos, right? If you can't make it Tuesday, I hope to see you back here Thursday for another episode of Book Club. Both Tuesday and Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern. YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, not TikTok. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch. Twitch first. Twitch. Also, before we go, this is your reminder that you can trust your intuition. Your imagination is powerful. You think clearly, and your third eye sees all. Family, again, I thank you. Have a great weekend. I look forward to doing this again next week. And with that, I say peace.